My husband poured red wine all over my father's head at our anniversary dinner while his family laughed and cheered. What they didn't know, my father and his simple clothes owned the billion-dollar company keeping their business alive. 24 hours later, they were bankrupt. Here's how one cruel moment destroyed everything. Before I tell you how my husband went from humiliating my daddy to sobbing at his feet, smash that subscribe button and comment below if you've ever been disrespected by people who thought they were better than you. You need to hear this entire story because the karma, it hit harder than any Hollywood movie. My name is Isabella, and 3 years ago I made the biggest mistake of my life. I married a man named Preston Van Heusen. Now I know what you're thinking. That name alone should have been a red flag, right? But here's the thing. When I met Preston at a charity gala in Manhattan, he seemed different. He wasn't like those other rich boys who wore their privilege like a crown. He asked about my work, my dreams, my childhood in the Bronx. He made me feel seen. I grew up in a small apartment with my father, Harold. My mother passed when I was young, so it was just the two of us. Daddy worked hard every single day of his life. He wore simple clothes, drove an old pickup truck that barely started in the winter, and lived in the same modest house he'd bought 30 years ago. To anyone looking at us, we were just regular working people. Nothing special, nothing impressive. But my father taught me something that would change everything. He taught me that respect isn't about what you wear or what you drive. It's about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. He taught me patience. He taught me to watch and learn before I react. And most importantly, he taught me that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. I worked my way through college, got my degree in marketing, and landed a good job at a firm in the city. That's where I was when I met Preston. We dated for a year and then he proposed. I should have seen the warning signs during our engagement, but love makes you blind, doesn't it? His family, the Van Hoens, they were old money. Real estate empire, country clubs, the whole package. And from the very first family dinner, they made it clear that I didn't belong. Preston's mother, Constance, had this way of smiling at you while insulting you at the same time. "Oh, Isabella, you're so articulate," she'd say, like she was surprised a black woman could form complete sentences. His father, Gerald, would just nod along with whatever Constance said, like he'd given up having his own opinions decades ago. Then there was Preston's sister, Bridget, spoiled, mean, and obsessed with designer everything. And his brother, Miles, who ran the family business operations and never missed a chance to remind everyone how smart he thought he was. They'd touch my hair without asking. They'd make comments about my ethnic features like I was some exotic pet. They questioned whether I was with Preston for his money at least once a month. And slowly, month by month, Preston started joining in. The man who'd seemed so different at that gala started making jokes about my humble background at dinner parties. He'd roll his eyes when I talked about visiting my father. He became one of them. But here's what none of them knew. My father, Harold, wasn't just a hard worker. He was Harold Harrison, founder and owner of Harrison Holdings, a private equity firm worth $3.2 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. Billion. With AB, Daddy built his empire from absolutely nothing over 35 years. He started with one small investment property in Brooklyn and turned it into an empire that stretched across commercial real estate, tech startups, and manufacturing. But he never changed who he was. He still wore his old jeans and flannel shirts. He still drove that beat-up truck. He still lived in that same house in the Bronx. He told me once, "Baby girl, when people think you have nothing, they show you who they really are." That's the most valuable information in the world. So when I fell in love with Preston, I made a promise to my father. I wouldn't tell anyone about his wealth. Not until we knew for sure who these people really were. Daddy met Preston's family a few times over those 3 years. And let me tell you, they treated him like he was invisible, like he was beneath them. Miles actually asked him to go park his car once. Can you imagine a billionaire being treated like a valet by people whose entire net worth was less than what my father made in interest each month? I watched it all. I stayed quiet. I waited and I hurt because the man I married was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Then came our third anniversary and everything exploded. Preston announced he wanted to throw a big anniversary dinner. Fancy steakhouse, private dining room, his whole family invited. I didn't want to do it, but he insisted. So, I invited my father. Preston actually groaned when I told him. "Do we have to?" he said. "He'll look so out of place, Isabella." I should have walked away right then. But I didn't. What I didn't know at the time was that the Van Hoyen family was drowning. Their real estate company was failing. They'd made bad investments, over-leveraged properties, and now they needed a massive cash infusion to survive. $650 million to be exact. And there was only one company willing to even consider helping them. Harrison Holdings. Miles had been negotiating with my father's lawyers and executives for months. He'd never met the owner of Harrison Holdings. Everything went through intermediaries, but the deal was close. So close that the Van Hoyens were already spending money they didn't have. Already celebrating like the cash was in their accounts. The night before the anniversary dinner, Preston came home drunk. Really drunk. He started ranting about how embarrassing my family was, how he couldn't wait for this dinner to be over. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "At least after tomorrow, we won't have to pretend anymore. Once we close the Harrison deal, I'm divorcing you anyway." My family was right. I married down. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about every moment of disrespect, every cruel comment, every time I'd been made to feel small. And I sent my father a text message. "Daddy, tomorrow might be interesting." The next evening, we all arrived at the restaurant. The Van Hoyens came in their designer clothes and luxury cars, already loud and drunk on champagne at 6 o'clock in the evening. They'd reserved a private dining room with a long table. My father arrived in his old truck wearing a simple but clean suit he'd probably owned for 20 years. The look on Constance's face when she saw him could have curdled milk. Bridget whispered to her mother, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh God, he's here." Miles laughed and said, "Did he take the bus?" Preston looked embarrassed, like my father's existence was personally offensive to him. They sat Daddy at the far end of the table, as far from the family as possible. The disrespect started immediately. Gerald made jokes about blue-collar workers and how real men work with their hands. Constance asked my father invasive questions about his little job with this fake sweet voice that made me want to scream. "So, Harold's still doing maintenance work? That must be so fulfilling." My father just smiled politely and answered simply. He'd been through worse than these people could ever imagine. Then Bridget picked up his wrist and laughed at his watch. "Is that from a flea market?" "Oh my God, it's actually vintage and not in a good way." I was shaking with rage, but my father squeezed my hand under the table. "Stay calm, baby girl," he whispered. Then Miles started bragging. Oh Lord, the bragging. He went on and on about this massive business deal they were closing. $650 million from Harrison Holdings. He announced like he was the king of Wall Street. "We're about to be set for life." Gerald raised his glass in a toast. To the Van Hoysen empire. Preston joined right in. "Finally, we can live the life we deserve," he said, looking right at me. Without any dead weight. The whole table laughed. My father, calm as ever, asked a few innocent questions about their business. They mocked him. "You wouldn't understand high finance, Harold," Miles said with his condescending smile. "It's pretty complicated stuff." Dinner was served and Preston kept drinking. He got meaner with every glass. He started talking about my embarrassing background right there at the table, saying how he'd had to lower his standards to marry me. My father remained completely calm, completely dignified. He just ate his food and listened. Then Preston stood up. I'll never forget this moment as long as I live. He was swaying a little, drunk and mean, and he grabbed his wine glass. "You know what?" he said. "I'm tired of pretending." He walked over to my father's seat. This is for 3 years of embarrassment. And he poured the entire glass of red wine over my father's head. The wine splashed everywhere. It dripped down Daddy's face, soaked into his suit, pulled on the white tablecloth, and the Van Hoen family erupted in laughter. Constance was cackling. Miles was slapping the table. Gerald was laughing so hard he was crying. And Bridget, that evil witch, was recording it on her phone, probably planning to post it on social media. The entire restaurant went silent. Other diners were staring in complete shock. But my father, he just slowly reached for his napkin. He wiped the wine from his face with such dignity, such calm that it made everyone's laughter sound even more evil by comparison. Then he stood up and something in his posture changed. Suddenly, he wasn't the humble man they'd been mocking. He was something else entirely. He looked at Preston and said quietly, "Son, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Preston was still laughing. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do, old man? Sue me?" My father pulled out his phone. He made one call. Just one. "Carol, it's Harold Harrison. Cancel the Van Hoysun deal immediately. All 650 million and blacklist them from every partner we have." He hung up. The table went quiet. Miles laughed nervously. "Harrison, that's funny. That's the company we're dealing with." His smile was uncertain now. My father looked at him. "I know. I own it." You could have heard a pin drop. Constance's face went white. "What are you talking about?" She whispered. "Harrison Holdings," my father said calmly. "I built it from nothing 35 years ago. I own every share, and you just lost everything." Preston's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Miles frantically grabbed his phone, and I watched his face drain of all color as he read the email. "Deal can-led, effective immediately." Gerald started stammering. "This is a joke, right? Some kind of prank. You humiliated me in public," my father said. "You mocked my daughter for 3 years. You laughed while your son assaulted me. Now you pay the price. Respect isn't optional. It's mandatory." The panic that erupted was beautiful. Miles was on the phone screaming at lawyers who confirmed that yes, Harold Harrison owned the company and yes, his word was final. Constance grabbed my father's arm, begging, "Wait, we can talk about this. We can work something out." My father pulled away from her touch. "Don't put your hands on me." Bridget was crying, mascara running down her face. "Preston, fix this. Do something." But Preston just stood there, frozen, finally understanding what he'd done. Gerald tried to apologize. "It was just a joke. We didn't mean anything by it." My father's voice cut through like ice. "Racism is never a joke. Disrespect has consequences." That's when I stood up. I'd been quiet for 3 years, but not anymore. "I knew who my father was the whole time," I said. "I watched you people mock him, mock me, mock where we came from. I stayed quiet because Daddy taught me patience. He wanted to see who you really were. Congratulations. You showed us everything." I looked at Preston and all I felt was disgust. "And you? You said you were divorcing me anyway. Consider yourself served. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow." "Oh, and Preston, I've been recording every cruel thing you've said for months. Hope you enjoy divorce court." My father put his arm around me and we walked out of that restaurant with our heads held high. Behind us, the Van Hoen family was falling apart. Bridget was having a complete breakdown. Miles was making desperate phone calls that wouldn't save them. Constance was screaming at Gerald, blaming him for everything. And Preston just stood there, staring at his hands, finally realizing that he destroyed his entire life in one moment of cruelty. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Headlines read, "Billionaire Harold Harrison, humiliated by son-in-law's family." Bridget's video had gone viral, but not the way she'd planned. People were horrified by their behavior. Van Hoysun property stock crashed. Banks called in loans. Partners pulled out of deals. Employees started quitting. Within 24 hours, the family that had mocked us was facing complete bankruptcy. A week later, they showed up at my father's office building. Security barely recognized them. They looked broken, desperate, nothing like the arrogant people from that dinner. They were escorted to my father's conference room, and for the first time they saw his empire. The massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The staff treating him with genuine respect. The evidence of real power, not the fake kind they'd been born into. Preston fell to his knees and cried. Actually cried. "Please, sir, I'm so sorry. I'll do anything." Constance begged. "We'll lose everything." Miles had lost all his arrogance. "We were wrong. So wrong." My father listened to them grovel. Then he gave them his terms. Preston would sign divorce papers giving me everything. They'd all make public apologies, admitting to racism and abuse. They'd donate whatever was left of their money to causes supporting black businesses, and they'd stay away